Collins & Co invite you to join us for our regular lunchtime not-for-profit seminars and workshops. In these sessions, guest speakers deliver expert knowledge on topics specifically catered for the not-for-profit sector. Sessions are held at Collins & Co from 12 till 2 and lunch is provided. Contact Collins & Co to find out the next seminar topic and to register.
Hi, I'm Michael McGann, Creative Manager of Skysdesign, a graphic design social enterprise. In today's session we're going to be talking about not-for-profit and charity brands, and in particular we're going to be talking about brand positioning, brand clarity, brand equity, and why those things are important for strong organisations to communicate effectively with their target audience to create the outcomes and the impact that they want to achieve. So for those who kind of didn't hear about Skysdesign, we started as a program in a youth service, and our role at that point in time was to find commercial projects for young people studying a Cert 3, and the organisation ran an alternative education program for kids that were dropping out of school or on the streets or what have you, so hard to engage kids. We did that from about 2010 to 2014, and then the youth service was wound up and all of the programs went across and joined Melbourne City Mission except for us. And so we now sit inside another charity called St Kilda Community Housing, and they provide rooming house accommodation to about 350 people in St Kilda. And so all of our profit goes back to them. We're employees of them, and all of our profit goes back to them, and they use that money wherever they want to across the organisation. All of our clients are not-for-profits, charities, what have you. We don't tend to work outside of the sector. We will if people come and find us and want us to do work, but we're not enthused by that sort of work. We've done it on a few occasions and it's never really been anything that's motivated, so we'd much rather work around the charity and not-for-profit space. And we do everything from designing stationery to full brand work to website design, print design, whatever comes our way. We do animation, we do filmmaking, so we made small videos for people, just telling stories of what the organisation is about. So anything that fits into that creative space, we try and make sure we can provide it. I firmly believe that organisations and brand are the people in them, and it's those people that then create the identity. So the archetype framework is about people, and so it works really well for organisations trying to get everybody behind a single identity. So we'll touch on that. This is like one piece of a presentation, so let me know if anything's not clear or you want to know more about something, because I've probably got some other stuff that I can dig out and show you. So essentially brands, logos, I think of them as kind of the window into an organisation or into a company, and depending on your perception of that organisation, the logo will resonate with you in some way or not. So for example, I mean the obvious ones here for me are the Greens and World Vision, and the Human Rights Commission. Depending on your political leanings, the Greens logo will have some reaction for you. World Vision are the same. Human Rights Commission, all of those are just windows into an organisation. From large to small, Port Phillip Community Group is literally a small organisation that runs on about $1 million a year, providing local support services to people. Launch Housing provide housing across the state. The Myotherapy Association is a member-based organisation. Their challenge was, and so that's one that we've designed, their challenge was that as the national body for myotherapists, they only had about 60% or less of myotherapists as members. The rest of them belonged to Massage Association, physiotherapy, what have you. So they were really struggling around how to bring people in and how to understand why people weren't members of them. So part of that rebrand was looking at what did members want from them? What was it that they were doing that was no longer relevant to members? They'd started as a couple of parents really who were concerned that their children who were studying myotherapy weren't really getting any educational support outside of once they'd done their degrees. So they started to sort of build this network of educators and coursework and programs and accreditation about 30 years ago, and they just got trapped into that, and so everybody who looked at them thought that's all they did was just education, and essentially recorded accreditation, worked with insurance companies to make sure that they understood they were accredited, but didn't see anything else that they did, and yet they did a whole lot of other things that other associations weren't doing. So they had to reposition themselves completely to try and capture that other block of members. Turning Point is drug and alcohol, and Gen 44 is a program within the state government's Level Crossing Removal Authority, which is taking young people out of the western suburbs who are studying at Victoria University and placing them in mentor positions right across the partnerships of organisations and companies working on the Level Crossing Removal project, whether that be in accounting or in construction or in design or what have you. They're finding places for young people, and their goal is to place about 240 people in positions by 2022, I think. So they've got some pretty ambitious goals. And so when we did that one, we then did a suite of brands for them that mirrored that were connected to programs that they had where they were trying to bring more women into the rail industry, because at the moment it's about 20% of the workforce is female. So they wanted to kind of reset that gender imbalance. Another program that they run, which is trying to take employees from the coal industry and the automotive industry and move them across into the rail industry. So that brand was kind of designed to show that through that Gen 44 program, there are lots of different directions you can go in. But again, if you've not seen any of those organisations, they have no relevance to you. They're just a logo. So this is why we think that brands are much more than that, and they are, in some ways, it's a visceral response that you have to them when you first see a logo. If you don't like Coke, you'll have a reaction to the Coke brand. You know, it is as simple as that. When a brand doesn't deliver what it's supposed to deliver, the logo is the thing that you will react to, and have an essence or a sense of distrust of, if you know that it's not delivering on its promise to you. So some definitions of a brand. A brand is a promise to the public that an organisation possesses certain features or will behave in certain ways. And brands function in the same way as trust, by simplifying decision making and acting as summarised knowledge. So essentially we read a lot into a brand, into its logo, and everything needs to align behind that to make sure that it is consistent all the time. For for-profit and what I call for-purpose brands, so a for-purpose organisation is essentially a charity or a not-for-profit that is geared towards making some kind of social change. So the differences are really quite straightforward. In a for-profit sector, the goal of the brand is to drive profit. It's to differentiate it from other organisations in its environment, but ultimately, even if it's about aligning staff behind a common ethos, the goal is profit. In a for-purpose space, the brand is much more complex than that. So in a not-for-profit sector, it's about making sure that you've got a consistent organisation culture and structure. And lots of not-for-profits, their culture is actually about consensus building. So organisations often don't make decisions until they've consulted widely. They'll talk to all the staff, they'll make sure everybody's heard. So processes take a lot longer, but potentially more embedded. It also drives the values of people who come and work for them. Okay. Employees in the not-for-profit sector tend to be more what we call intrinsically motivated. So they're more motivated by social causes, more environmental change, more focused on the world around them, rather than extrinsically motivated, which is more about personal wealth and personal success and reward. And you see more of the extrinsic motivations occurring in the corporate space. I spent 15 years in financial services, so it's an absolute denizen for people who just want to get ahead and are interested in, just personal wealth and what that means for their ego. In the for-purpose space, collaboration and partnerships are really important. There's very few organisations that can do something without having another organisation to help them, or having a partnership with government to fund them, or philanthropy to fund them. So brand is really important in building trust that the organisation will do what it says on the box and will deliver on the promises that they make. Complexity. Most organisations have complex clients and deliver complex programs to meet the needs of those clients. So it's not a simple, here's a widget, we're selling a widget. There's layers to what goes on. And not only that, there's layers of reporting and compliance and everything else that goes on as well. So the brand brings all of that together as well to make sure that there's confidence around how the organisation delivers on that. And mission, ultimately, which underpins all charities, is what is the mission, and all not-for-profits. Even for you guys, you'll have a mission and a purpose and what have you within your constitution. This is also similar in terms of member-based organisations too. If the goal is to grow members, you need to make sure that all of your employees understand what it is you deliver to members. They have to be on board with that, and they have to understand the value of that to those members, otherwise they won't do it convincingly. And every touch point that someone has with your organisation is a representation of your brand. So it needs to be reinforced and consistent all the time. You probably have collaborations and partnerships, whether that be with other community organisations or even commercial providers in the area. Your ability to consistently deliver on the things you say you're going to deliver on is also part of your brand recognition and your brand strength, I suppose. So the idea behind that is that, quite simply, organisations don't tell people why they're in the game they're in. So if you're a charity, for example, very few organisations communicate from a values perspective, and very few companies communicate from a values perspective. And everything we do is driven by emotion. It's driven by what we call our limbic system, which basically is the part of our brain that assesses good and bad experiences that we've had in the past and creates an emotional response in our bodies to that. So anything that feels good, we're more involved in, we're more engaged in, and anything that's negative, our brain says steer clear of it. So values and marketing that aligns with our values is attractive, is naturally attractive to us. It's why we choose to do the things we do. It's why we choose the causes that we choose to become involved in. It might be as simple as we've had a family experience of something, and that's what our decision is, but the decision around which organisations to partner with comes from which one is actually communicating at our values level. For companies, it is exactly the same. You know, if you're trying to bring people in around, to play golf and to become members and become long-term members, what are the things that you do that are different to every other golf club, or that you position differently to other golf clubs because it attaches to some sense of identity in the people you're trying to bring in? So for example, maybe for you guys the issue is not the negative is not that you're seen as one of the top 77 clubs in Australia. The issue is that you're actually appearing and it is that you appear inaccessible. But if you can figure out the value set behind how you make yourselves appear valuable and what somebody gets because they feel aligned, you'll probably find that it's an easier conversation to engage people. When I was in financial services, it was hilarious. We used to give people marketing materials. If they had like doctors and lawyers, we created marketing materials that effectively they could hand to a doctor that said, none of your friends have got this. You can go to the golf club and you can talk about this product that none of them have heard of before because it's unique and we're the only ones who have it. And they loved it, quite simply because it gave them bragging rights on the golf course to talk about something their friends had never heard of. So it just tapped into their sense of individuality from everybody else. So understanding those drivers for people is a really critical point, and it's what a lot of, touching on what he was saying, a lot of organisations don't think to that point of, what are you going to get from this? Why would you buy this from me? Why would you donate to me? Why would you choose me over anybody else? What are the things that we do that are different or that we've positioned differently? So we've understood who you are and why they're of relevance to you. So that's a big part of that why, and that values piece is a really big part of that why piece is a really big part of values communication as well. This is definitely more of a charity slide, this one. So we look at organisations in terms of purpose. So the mission and the why are the base of everything that they do. This idea of who the organisation is, its personality or its archetype, is critical. And these three then influence the type of programs that are designed, the types of people that an organisation will work with, and ultimately the type of impact that the organisation can have. So to explain that in a bit more detail, if we believe that our role as an organisation is to build the capacity of our beneficiaries and to work with them so that they can become more self-directed, more independent, able to look after themselves more and make better decisions for themselves, that then influences the types of programs that we deliver and create and go looking for funding to roll out. It then influences the beneficiaries that we have, because if our whole model is built around capacity building, we're not going to go looking for people, and we're not going to bring people in necessarily who just want to be looked after, because there won't be that connection there, because people who want to be looked after will feel challenged by this. So the process of moving them to that point is going to be too great. And I'm doing some work at the moment in a drug and alcohol service, and they're really clear that you don't get into their rehab and detox services until you've committed to actually trying to change your behaviour. Now that doesn't work, but they've got some people there, you know, who have walked out. It's funny, I was doing a session with similar session as this, and one of the centre managers said to me, you know, we have people who come in, they'll be here for 6 weeks doing the detox, and then when they walk out, they're like, that was the best thing I've ever done. I can't wait to come back. So it's like they've set themselves up that once they're back out on the streets, they will go and fall back into exactly the same patterns, and so the detox is kind of like a stopgap for them where they just get to cleanse and then out they go again. As an organisation, they're caught between saying, actually that's not what we want. We want people who are going to come in and make concerted efforts to actually change their behaviour, but they also know that addiction is an illness, and it, you know, and like all chronic illnesses, you'd never really get over it. So they have to be able to manage those people and provide for those people. But their programs are delivered for people who really do want to make a change and do want to take control of what they do. And so that's the people that they market or that they communicate their programs to. And so their impact on society is different to an organisation that is only interested in looking after people. Because if you're only interested in looking after people, then you will protect them more. You know. So this is how we look at kind of that model of organisation purpose.
Michael, can you,
yeah.
The difference between why we exist and what is our impact?
Because why we exist is value driven. So it's your value. So if you're, the impact is the ultimate thing that you change. So
isn't that why I exist?
No, it's not, because the why is about why you come to work. It might be to create this change, but why do you work in the sector you work in as opposed to another sector? So that's why you find, particularly in the charity sector, a lot of people do end up working within the same field. They work in youth work, or they work in aged care, or they work in community development or international aid or what have you. It's because their values are driven to make a difference in those areas. The impact is the reward. If you think about going back to the difference between a for-profit and a for-purpose brand, this is the purpose. So its basic social impact is the equivalent of profit for a charity. But the impact that you have is ultimately the profit for the work that you do. And one of the challenges is for most organisations, they don't know how to communicate that, and they don't know how to measure that either. You know, so it's a numbers game still for many, rather than an outcomes focused game and a story game as around being able to tell the stories of people who have come through programs and changed, so that people sitting outside the organisation can actually visualise what that impact looks like. But yeah, the why is definitely a values piece. And that's just a cap on the golden circle idea. So very few organisations know why they do what they do. It's the same in the NFP charity sector, but it's not as bad. We're kind of more in sync, I think, because of that idea that people are more intrinsically motivated means that we're more engaged with that why. But at a brand communication level, it doesn't always come through clearly. How is, how they do what they do, the things that make them special or unique, and what they do is essentially the products that they push out. So we talked about values. So this is the definition that we work to. So guiding principles in life that transcend situations, link to emotion and operate subconsciously most of the time. A group called Common Cause in the UK did some really extensive research around human values. They did literature research that took them back to about the 1960s, and then they did a whole lot of social research as well. And they identified these 58 universal values and 10 distinct motivational goals or values segments. They then rolled that out internationally and tested it across different countries around the world and found that it was consistent everywhere that they went. Okay? And they did things like they'd run some tests for people around, some quizzes for people around their motivations to see where they fit in that sort of intrinsic or extrinsic channel. And then one thing they did was when they'd finished those assessments, everybody had to go in and talk to somebody else. And the person that was interviewing them would, be taking notes and would knock a box of pencils onto the ground. The test was to see how many people picked up the pencils or helped pick up the pencils. The actual test being done was irrelevant. They were able to show that the people who were more intrinsically motivated were more inclined to stop and help pick up pencils than those that came through as being extrinsically motivated. So it was a simple kind of motor test, I suppose, for how people work. So intrinsic and extrinsic values. Intrinsic, inherently rewarding to pursue, associated with greater pro-social and environmental attitudes and behaviours. Extrinsic, essentially the opposite, more focused on wealth, success, social recognition, and reduced pro-social. They've also been able to show that people who operate from an intrinsic frame tend to be healthier. So less illness, less injuries, things like that. What's wrong button? It's not really clear, sorry. I can kill the light for a sec. Will that do you any problems, Jerome? No. So this is their circular map. Hopefully you can read that a little bit better. Essentially, through this section here, self-direction, and then above conformity, so benevolence, universalism, and self-direction are more of the intrinsic motivated segments. And so you've got values in there such as freedom, creativity, being broad-minded, unity with nature, quality, mature love, true friendship, being loyal. And so they found that these were consistently represented in people who were intrinsically motivated. Stimulation is a borderline, but things like hedonism, achievement, power, security, conformity, and tradition are more extrinsic motivations. And they're not saying that they're good or bad, they're just saying that this is the way those values break up. And behind those sit some pretty clear definitions as well. What I like about this for organisation brands is it's deeper than the idea that, our values are around trust and respect and honesty, which are all fine, but everybody's got those values. And you can walk into any organisation with that list knowing that they will get ticked off. They're essentially givens for 90% of organisations, I would say. This allows us to think a little bit more deeply about the values within an organisation, built around the people that are in those organisations. So you can actually get a consensus of these values. So the way we do this is we actually ask people to identify what are the top 5 values here in the organisation at the moment, and what are the least 5. And typically, we're finding that the top 5 sit in that intrinsic space. And the least 5 are always things like national security, wealth. There are a couple of the ones that always come out. Respect for tradition is often one that, whilst you know that it's there, they're progressive organisations, so they're always trying to move to a new point where the impact that they're having and the programs that they're delivering are evolving. So they're focused on progress. But interestingly, you know, national security, reciprocation of favours, social power, things like that always come up as the least 5 important for an organisation. So yeah, you can Google Common Cause. They've got a whole lot of free resources. There is an Australian chapter of them as well. Do a lot of alignment work, do a lot of consulting work in Australia. All of this work was done to understand how charities and not-for-profits can market themselves in a way that is different to what was happening at the time. And a good example of how this differs is in the city of Melbourne last year, might have been last year, they were putting price tags on trees, saying this tree generated $20,000 of, you know, oxygen or what have you, or you know, got rid of $20,000 worth of CO2. Whilst the goal was to show the value of a tree in society and in the city, the reverse of that is suddenly anyone can come along and say, here's my $20,000, can I chop the tree down? Because you've priced it for me now, so it has a very clear value. However, if they're painting pictures of trees as things that kids play on, that have an emotional connection to us as people because of our experience as kids climbing trees, what they look like in our gardens, etc., as shade, etc., etc., much harder to value that, much harder to diminish that to a dollar value. So the values marketing piece becomes a much deeper way of talking about what it is that you do. A lot of organisations still talk about outputs. We help this many people. It costs us this amount of money to deliver these services. Great, that's all really important. But tell me what you're doing for the people in your organisation. Tell me what the stories of change are in your organisation. Tell me the stories of people who came not expecting to get a lot and walked away feeling different or feeling more connected. Okay, that's what people want to know now. We are humans, we are connected to each other in some way, shape or form. We like to hear good stories about what's going on and we'll invest in good stories. As part of their research, Common Cause found that 74% of people identified as being intrinsically motivated. 77% of people felt that everybody else was extrinsically motivated. So we don't believe that everyone else is like us. So if we're actually then pitching any of our messaging at an extrinsic level to say, great return on investment, great value, you know, good spend of money, etc., we're actually not communicating in the right way. If we're communicating around stories and connection and opportunities and what feels good, and from those value sets, we have more chance of connecting with people in the right ways and bringing them into our story. This is a piece of values marketing. Tell me if you've seen it, but it's a great example, I think, of a company that has used values to underpin its message. Oops. Go back that way. Okay.
It's easy to put people in boxes. There's us, and there's them. The high earners, and those just getting by. Those we trust, and those we try to avoid. There's the new Danes, and those who've always been here. The people from the countryside, and those who've never seen a cow. The religious, and the self-confident. There are those we share something with, and those we don't share anything with.
Velkommen. Jeg kommer til at stille jer nogle spørgsmål i dag. Nogle af dem kan godt være lidt personlige, men jeg håber, I vil svare ærligt på dem. Hvem herinde i rummet var klassens klovn?
pot. And then suddenly, there's us. We who believe in life after death. We who've seen UFOs. And all of us who love to dance. We who've been bullied. And we who've bullied others. And then there's us, the lucky ones who've had sex this past week. We who are broken-hearted. We who are madly in love. We who feel lonely. We who are bisexual. And we who acknowledge the courage of others. We who have found the meaning of life. And we who have saved lives. And then there's all of us who just love Denmark. So maybe there's more that brings us together than we think. TV2 Denmark. All that we share.
What do you think? Does it? Are there bits in that where it really resonates for you? Is there anything that stands out? For me, it's always that little kid that admits to bullying. Yep. Yeah, and the guy with the huge arms. I always, I'm just always watching him to see which group, and I've seen it probably 9 times now. I just watch different people now just to see where they go. But there's always some reaction in that video. And I go, oh yeah, I forgot about this. This is a really nice bit, or and so it's not flogging you products. It's not flogging you anything. All it's talking about is connecting and how we all share something with other people. So it's really easy to invest your time in watching it. So if you're thinking about how you bring people into your organisation, talking about where the similarities are and where the alignments are is a much easier piece than saying, we work with these people, or we deal with those people, or we're only here for this group. Whilst that is what positioning and differentiation is, there's different ways to kind of do that. So, and for charities that are and organisations that are trying to build fundraising bases and community donors and what have you, showing the connections is a critical piece in doing that. And even for from a membership perspective, membership is going to be more than just coming along and playing golf. What's all the other elements that go on in the club that actually contribute to someone's sense of community in the area? What percentage of your members are Point Cook based? As in live in Point Cook?
At least a quarter, I think.
Yep, okay.
Quarter to a third.
And so the rest has come from other parts of the western suburbs?
Yeah.
Yep. And is it primarily Williamstown through? Oh, okay, so it's that way. Okay.
So, and that's basically people are happier to drive against the traffic on a Saturday or Sunday morning our way,
Yep.
as opposed to trying to go the other way. So
Yeah, okay.
there's another zone around Western, Port Melbourne even.
Yeah, okay. Okay.
We've got a captured audience. Sanctuary Lakes, where I think we've got, say of that third, half of those people would live in Sanctuary Lakes. But conversely, less than 10% of Sanctuary Lakes residents are members of the golf clubs.
Yeah, okay. Yep, okay.
So,
Cool.
good messaging.
Based on a 30-second understanding of your work. But it seems to me that you have one thing that's unique that a lot of organisations, from my experience, are trying to add value to their offer. In a sense, you've got, my perception is that your offer has value attributed to it, but that's seen as a barrier to access. But at least you're starting at a position where there's a recognition that your offer has value. So it's really, rather than trying to build value into an offer to get people to invest or buy in, your offer is already perceived as being perhaps luxury or value add. So it's just about how well actually you can, it's an almost affordable luxury kind of thing, you know what I mean? It's a different position to be coming from. So I think there's some positives there from the sounds of it. You're not having to try to create that value, it's already there.
Yeah.
Yep. What about you, Lucy? How do you go about bringing in supporters?
In terms of corporate supporters?
Well, yeah, just in terms of messaging around what's in it for them, what's the connections, where's the alignment?
We're fortunate enough that we provide support and advice for people with eating disorders. So there is that direct contact there. And it's just not the person with the eating disorder, it's also their family and friends, siblings, professionals, doctors, psychologists who have a patient who needs some advice on how to guide them through to get support. And then there's the people that have recovered and want to give back and help others as well.
So you're relying on a very personal relationship with an eating disorder.
Definitely. And there's also the stigma as well around eating disorders, and that factors that it's a very serious mental health illness. There's more suicide, high suicide rates for eating disorders than for depression, anxiety.
Yeah, okay. And I remember a couple of years ago, and it may still be the case, but one of the growing kind of cohorts was young men who were, working out and then not eating properly.
Body dissatisfaction. We're also seeing a lot in orthorexia, where that is people who, I guess, in the paleo diet and all those sort of fad diets now, that when it kind of flips over and it becomes actually an eating disorder and they become so obsessive with it. And we see that quite a bit in the fitness industry too. But binge eating is actually the highest rate for eating disorders than anything else. Everything's of anorexia as a 16-year-old teenage girl has. But we're seeing it's kind of actually quite a bit different.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a friend who works in advertising, and I was chatting to him a couple of weeks ago, and he was saying to me, it's just painful at work at the moment. I said, why, what's going on? He goes, all the girls are on their shedding diets. I was like, they're what? And I gather it is just with summer coming, everyone's just eating in a way to strip fat and which, sounds like a binge, particularly if it's becoming cyclical too. So how do you manage that? How do you communicate, say, into the fitness industry? How do you communicate to get people on board?
We're actually, we provide a lot of workshops for fitness industry professionals, PTs, where it goes towards, we're partnered with Fitness Australia, so it goes towards their accreditation points. And they do, take part in this workshop where they can help them sort of identify someone who might be unwell. And I guess how to have that conversation with someone and refer them on. We provide training for doctors that goes towards their accreditation points as well. And we're actually finding that dentists also are picking up, so for someone who's bulimic and purging acid, they can see it.
Oh, right.
So that's wear away their teeth too.
Okay.
So, it causes quite a lot of problems really.
Okay. And Francie, for you, I mean, you've got a fairly niche audience for you, haven't you? Is it hard to get engagement with what you're doing?
It is. Well, it is and it isn't. We are now focused. Well, we've got a elderly community on our side already, and it's been going for years. But we are now focusing on their children, on their family members, because they are the ones that are, at the end of the day, decision makers for their parents. So it's how to reach that cohort and convince them that we are the best, you know,
Yeah.
for their
Yep.
parents, family, and all that, for the
Mhm.
support. You know.
Are there other organisations like yours targeting the Croatian community, or is it more just the generic aged care providers that you're
more
kind of-
generic. There is one, but we have more funded programs, so
Mhm.
we are on top. Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, no, we're pretty good, but obviously, you know, we can improve, and we have to. You know, we can't just sit on our laurels. You know, we
Yeah,
need
yeah,
to be constantly on our lookout.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. And would you water down your connection to bring in people not from the Croatian community?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
are broadening our services as well.
Mhm.
It's mainly them coming to us. So
Yep.
we run a private arm,
Mhm.
brokerage services, where we broker our services with other service providers.
Ah,
and
okay, yeah.
pretty known for the quality of services we provide. This is
Mhm.
why other agencies pick us.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Okay.
Mm.
Yep, great. And Richard, for you, what's working? I mean, you're doing a name change and trying to get more out into the community.
Yeah, I
what's-
think for us, we've gotten to a stage where our mission had become our purpose.
Mhm.
So who we were was the programs that we operated or offered became what we were about.
Mhm.
And so we've been through a process over the last probably 2 years now of re-evaluating actually why do we do these programs and why do we do what we do.
Mhm. Mhm.
What is the difference we're trying to make? What is our impact? And so and that's still an evolution, but we are looking at it more from a perspective of seeing increased isolation within communities, increased disconnection, increased loneliness, and looking to create collaboration between different not-for-profits in terms of seeking to empower communities to re-engage, reconnect,
Okay.
to have a sense of hope and value and purpose
Mhm.
within community.
Yep.
And then looking at programs that might deliver those outcomes rather than, well, we just supply chaplains or we do this or we do
Yep.
training. And so it's an evolution. So a much broader community engagement model
Mhm.
as opposed to just a program delivery of chaplaincy.
Yeah. Okay.
Even
Yep.
though there's nothing wrong with chaplaincy in itself,
Mm,
but
mm.
looking at it in the context of a broader outcome.
Yep. Hmm. And so I think for everybody then there's a need to understand why another person or another organisation is going to want to partner with you. What is it about you that's going to actually help them build on what they're already trying to do?
Yeah.
You know?
And I think one of the things we've been exploring is that, and I guess this starts to go to what's unique about what you do,
Mm.
is that there is a lot of service providers who will provide a specific service or a specific program, but in terms of journeying with people across multiple programs and service provision, there's very few who do that.
Yep.
And so that's
Okay.
where someone like a chaplain based in a community environment can actually journey with people over a period of time across different service provision or program provision and just be journeying with
Yep.
them, and also bringing the connections in place for that person to engage in those
Yep.
different areas of
Okay.
program and service delivery.
Sounds
So
similar
that's-
to the Salvation Army had a program a number of years ago called Doorways, and essentially it was set up for emergency relief, but once you went in, you couldn't actually access emergency relief until you'd been connected in through a whole lot of other of their services to make sure that they were holistically looking at you. So you might have to see a psychologist, you might have to see financial counselling, you might have to go and talk to people about health issues. So they really were trying to provide a wraparound for a whole person rather than just, here's an emergency relief check and we'll see you in 10 days when that runs out and you're coming back for more. Yeah. Okay. So it's a good lead into brand positioning, and brand positioning is literally who's your target audience, so who's in your tribe, how coherent is your identity? So how do you differentiate from other similar services? How clear is your purpose and your approach to delivering on that purpose? And it streamlines marketing and fundraising. For me, the most important part about brand, though, is actually this piece here. It's an internal piece. Because once the brand is completely understood internally, it becomes easy to talk about it externally. Okay? And it's completely embedded and everybody's invested in it. So the target audience, has everyone heard the old term tribe building? Marketing tribes? It's essentially finding people that look, think and feel like you do, so that you're actually talking to the right people. So I use this image because basically the audience is in this beam of light. And too many organisations, for profit, not for profit, doesn't matter, just communicate like this. And anyone who gets caught in the net, fantastic. And it becomes a waste of money, for starters. So the trick is to understand, who am I, who's my audience, and then I just target all my marketing at that person or at that cohort of people. Because there is no point trying to talk to these people. They're not interested, they don't get it, they think differently, whatever. Being really clear and really consistent about who you are and your value to your target audience means that you will get those people listening. And these people, you may find that these people, as they identify, will move up into the beam of light. But you don't want to waste your time on them. Nobody has the marketing resources to just be there for everybody. And nobody has, nobody delivers something for everybody. A number of times I used to work with small businesses. I go, who's your target audience? Oh, everybody. We work with everybody. Okay, so what do you do for elderly people? Oh no, well, we don't do a lot for them. Right, well, what do you do for 22-year-olds? Oh no, they're of no use to us because they don't have super or they're not interested. So you don't do anything for them. So who's your target? Who is it that you're actually trying to communicate with? So being really clear about that allows you to really focus on what it is you actually give them, and what's your offer to them, and how do you differentiate from anyone else in your sector to make sure that you're only talking to them in a language that they understand about things that they need. Definitely a charity one. This is what we call a logic map. Some organisations have what we call the theory of change. It's essentially, what do we do? How do we do it? What difference does it make? For most organisations, there are different elements of this, but this is a really great exercise for organisations to actually understand what they do and how they create change.
That's really involved, isn't it?
Yeah. And that's why, coming back to that, one of those earlier slides about the complexity of a charity, it's because they're doing this. And so this isn't even the business plan, this is just a map of things that are delivered and how those things intersect. But yeah, they're called logic maps, or theory of change is the other name for them. But doing this kind of work means you can really figure out what it is that's going on inside your organisation. So it becomes critical for being able to position and differentiate from your competitors or other organisations. Once we kind of understand who we are and who our target audience is, then we can start to ask these questions. So, what's in it for me? For whoever's in my target audience, what is in it for me? What am I going to get? So if it's someone who we're looking for, Lucy, say, to give us money, what impact can I have by supporting you? So maybe I can't be involved in your organisation, but I've got money and I've got time, so how can I have impact vicariously through you? Otherwise, it's a pretty straightforward question. What am I going to get from you? What benefit am I going to gain by partnering with you? What does my organisation do? So what are our services? Okay. This question here about what is not what as in list all the programs, list all the bits and pieces that we do. This bit is really valuable to do in terms of analogies and case studies and metaphors. So thinking about the journey of somebody who's come into your organisation, this might be where you start to think about what you do. And for somebody who's coming with an eating disorder, Lucy, maybe this is about what kind of change they went through and how your organisation helped to create that change. Francie, same for you, it might be about someone that you're supporting. And these kind of messages and these kind of pictures then start to communicate to other people who have a similar experience, or they have a family member with a similar experience. At an organisation level, painting the picture of a client is really valuable, because then you're suddenly talking to other people like those clients. So when we did this work with the Myotherapy Association and them trying to figure out their member base, doing this work around the myotherapists that they were engaged with, one of the things I actually realised was that 30% of what they were doing was wasted because no one was interested in it. But what was valuable, they were then able to pick up and say, okay, this is what we can actually offer. This is the work that we do, and this is how it's of value to the people who want to participate with us. All member-based organisations. If you wanted to bring in, if you think about this, if you wanted to create a beginners class, this process for trying to attract beginners, you would be looking, okay, so what experience have other beginners had? How do we engage with them to help them create some kind of change? This is actually where you start to detail what actually goes on. How do you do it? How skilled are the staff that you have? How flexible are the programs that you deliver, or how rigid are they? How flexible are timetables if you're delivering teaching, for example, or running courses? And then looking at, okay, so what are the things that you excel at? Okay, so what we want to see here is just list 5 things that you do incredibly well. And then figure out why they're of benefit to a client. Okay, so what's what we call the self-expressive benefit. So try and put yourself in the client's shoes and think about what do they actually get from this that is of value to them. And then think about what's the future potential or the future benefit for them. What could I be? Who could I be? What could I get? Where could I be? You know, if what's in it for me is about my motivations, how does this build on those motivations and extend them so that, you know, so that maybe what I thought might be possible is actually not what's possible. I'm capable of more, or the return is more. That's what we want to be thinking about here. So where could somebody be in future by engaging? And so understanding this really starts to help organisations think about, okay, we know who we work with, now we know what difference we actually make to them, and we're starting to think about why that's of value to them. They're the critical pieces in any marketing campaign. Who am I talking to? What am I going to say? What are they going to get? Where's the proof that that's actually the case? And because no organisation acts in isolation, it's really good to know what it is you do and do well and do differently. And this piece here, you might find in reality that there's 50 things that you do and the organisation down the road does exactly the same 50 things. But the way you think about them is different. The way you understand the impact that they have on the people who come in, on your members or on your clients, what have you, that is different. And this is all about creating marketing that actually positions you around what clients need and what they want, not what you want and what you need. So that's a big shift for a lot of organisations and businesses, is actually, this isn't about you, it's about them. And people, whenever we go looking for someone to provide a service, we're always looking at what am I going to get from that? Are they talking to me or not talking to me? If they're not talking to me, then I'm not going to go and look somewhere else. It's a critical piece of your brand is, are you talking to the right people in the right language so that they know you're talking to them? And then we want to measure the brand. So we want to understand how strong it is. And the way we do that is through trust, partnerships, consistency, and focus. So trust is all about trust. It's about anyone knowing what you do and having confidence that you will do it over and over again. That what you say on the box is what you do. Brand strength is also measured by the number of partnerships that you have, the quality of those partnerships and the consistency of them. And organisations that have built trust and built partnerships will find that those partnerships grow. More people want to partner with strong organisations. More people want to partner with organisations that are consistent and continually back up what they say they're going to do. And that's where consistency comes in. Just doing it over and over again, whatever it is you say you're doing. And then having a focus on your mission and being absolutely true to whatever your mission is. Too many organisations get caught up in what we call mission creep. Anyone heard that term before? So mission creep is essentially, we do this thing, whatever that thing is, and oh look, there's some money over here, maybe we can go and get that money and run a program with that money. And so suddenly they kind of go like just slightly over here, but they divert resources and what have you to trying to do that thing. And they don't do that well, but this suffers. And all of a sudden what you've got is two entities kind of not quite doing what they've always said they're going to do with the consistency that people expect them to do it, and so both suffer. And in the eyes of whoever is looking, they are actually seen to be undermining what it is they were set up to do and moving away from purpose. And you see a lot of organisations, St Kilda Youth Service, who I was talking about earlier, that we started with, that was absolutely their problem. They just chased money, and then they'd just kind of divert resources to whatever that program was they got funded for, and other things would fall off the wagon because they hadn't resourced them properly. So it's a huge issue that organisations don't really stick clearly to what they're doing. And there's ways you can move around that. You know, some organisations will actually set up project teams to go and run something where they've got other money, but it's independently managed from the rest of the organisation. And businesses do it too, where you kind of carve out, you know, new business models or units that you want to trial, making sure they're properly resourced so it doesn't affect what your core business is also critical. So that's where focus comes in. So trying to be as consistently focused on purpose as you can. So trust is built when organisations are perceived by their stakeholders to do what they say they do. Trust drives support for the organisation and attracts partners, and differentiation and positioning enhances trust. So these things just build on each other. Once your brand is consistent and your messaging behind the brand is consistent, these things come. Partnerships build capacity to problem solve, and partnerships are relevant, and relevance are interrelated. The more you have, the more you deliver, the more people want to partner with you. Consistency is the responsibility of the executive. If the executive is not true to whatever the core purpose is, then the organisation will suffer. And that's not just the management team, that's the board as well. Okay? Consistency and credibility are intertwined, and consistency enhances trust and visibility. And then we've got focus. So it's sticking to mission, avoiding mission creep, ensuring everything aligns with the brand's meaning, and it brings clarity to your identity. And this is what's called the brand bank. And the idea is like any bank, brands have something that they're offering, whatever our programs, services, products are. All good news, all value is a deposit in the brand bank. Okay. It just builds on the positive perception that people have of us. Like any other bank though, when you have withdrawals, you need to have more deposits so you don't go into the red. Okay. Some good examples of organisations that have that have been caught with this. Shane Warne Foundation is one that always stands out. Okay. No deposits, nothing at all in the bank. Okay, started by a group of high-profile people, got a lot of money in, spent none of it in program delivery or on their core purpose. So they built nothing here. And in fact, I'd say they were always in here because of how they were formed and the kind of the media scrutiny on them as an organisation. So as soon as it was found that maybe they weren't spending money appropriately, everything just slid through withdrawals and they're gone. And I think they were around less than a year, I think, from memory. On the flip side of that, you've got World Vision, who last year had one of their managers in the Middle East, was arrested for funneling money to Hamas in Gaza. Tim Costello came out very quickly and said, we're not saying anything until the investigation is completed. And the media went pretty quiet and just waited until the investigation had been done. And he was found innocent. World Vision have so much credibility in this deposit space that people just backed off from it and were happy to wait and see what happened. Uralla, on the other hand, so everyone know Uralla, they're a disability service provider. You worked with them? Okay. So a lot of deposits, a lot of credibility in the sector, okay, and in the community. But they had a horrible, horrible situation. You were there through that?
I did it.
Yeah, right, okay, yep. Now, because they've got so much value still built up here, they're still going and they're still receiving funding and they're still delivering services. And that's the value of the brand bank, is to focus as much as possible on deposits and making sure that the things that happen reinforce the positives for the organisation. Because we know these come along. They always come along, whether you're a charity or a business. You know? All it takes is one disgruntled person to tell another person, and suddenly you've got some negative reputation. Yeah, well, yeah, that's right. Well, that used to be the thing, you know, if you had a good story, you'd tell one. If you had a bad story, you'd tell 9. Well, with social media, you tell 9,000. You know, it's that fast that it travels now. So it's critical to be focused on this. And your brand messaging has to constantly be focused on what's building good stories, what's building our credibility, what's building us a strong base under everything that we do. And that's why it's so important to make sure that everyone who works in the organisation is committed to the values and the purpose and is aligned with the personality of the organisation, because all of that adds into here. I don't know how many people have been to barbecues where someone started talking about how much they hate their job, you know, and all of a sudden it's like, oh right, or maybe they're not such a great company, or, you know, or they're in government, someone who works for government. You know, suddenly your perception of what is going on becomes different because you're talking to somebody who has a first-hand experience, okay? That's how this stuff actually works. And that's how brands get undermined, because someone picks up something, here's a bit of information. You know, I was in a meeting with someone yesterday, and he was saying that he was at a barbecue the other night with one of the senior managers from CoHealth, who are a big Western Suburbs health organisation. Now, he didn't say anything that was said, but the fact that at a social level you've got someone who spends all their time around the community sector in marketing and doing design and what have you, suddenly at a barbecue with a senior manager from a large organisation, if anything had been said, all it would take was for my friend to suddenly go and tell me, and for me to tell somebody, or for him to go and tell somebody else, and all of a sudden you've got some kind of groundswell of people going, oh yeah, I know CoHealth, I don't think they do a very good job, you know. So it's just whispers that these things start. So being absolutely focused on making sure that all your messaging is building positives and deposits. And then we try and wrap all of this up in this notion, so if you can't see that clearly, in this notion of an archetype. So an archetype is a personality type. The idea was created by Carl Jung, and what he identified was essentially that humans have this collective unconscious, and it's identifiable through fairy tales and myths. And the characters in those fairy tales and myths are the same, no matter which culture you go to, no matter which time period. You've got people who are jesters, you've got people who are the everyman, they just fit into the mix. You've got the carers, you've got the rulers and the creators. You've got the sage or the wise man, woman. You've got explorers, you've got outlaws, you've got magicians, and you've got heroes. All of these kind of fit into these 4 quadrants around either connecting with others, providing structure to the world, yearning for paradise, or leaving a mark on the world. And what we're able to do is actually show that those personality types that are described in here are perfectly transferable to brands. So organisations that are focused on using their knowledge to create some kind of change that is positive, and they're looking for a win-win for themselves and whoever their client or audience is, often fit into this magician space. Those that disrupt are typically fitting into an outlaw space. So Harley-Davidson is a classic outlaw brand. And the CEO of Harley-Davidson a number of years ago came out and said, look, if I just sold motorbikes and told everyone we just sell motorbikes, no one would have bought one and the company would have sold. Instead, what I did was went out and said, Harley-Davidson is a motorcycle for people who wear suits during the week and on the weekends want to wear leather and terrorise small villages. That's what Harley-Davidson stands for. It's a classic outlaw, and that's why now so many middle managers ride Harley-Davidsons. You know, that is the market for the brand now. Okay, they differentiated themselves by saying they're disruptors. Apple was a classic disruptor. You know, they completely changed the way people thought about computers. They redesigned styles, what have you. So they disrupted that market around Macintosh and around PCs. Beer is an everyman kind of brand. Okay, beer wants everyone to love it, wants everyone to drink it. Doesn't want to stick its head up above the parapet and stand out in any real way, but they want to belong and they want everyone to feel connected to them. Caregivers, interestingly, people say most charities fit into the caregiver space. I'm not finding that. I'm finding most charities that we're working with are fitting down here in this hero space where they're using the mastery of what they know to create change and to build capacity in whoever their target audience is. Some are falling into the magician space and the explorer. So that brand that I showed you at the very beginning, that Gen 44 one that we did for the government, that was done for what's called their inclusion and capability team. Yeah, I think that was their name. Inclusion, capability and learning. So they're basically a training team. So when we started to talk to them, it was very much that they were in this space. And when we did the archetype analysis, we found that it was kind of between explorer and sage, the way they thought about it. So when we went back and presented, they decided that they wanted to be in here because they're actually about creating new opportunities for people, opening up horizons that people had never kind of knew were available to them before. And that's what the outlaw is about. So the explorer is all about. It's about freedom and new adventure and new experiences and testing. That's why four-wheel drive brands are all explorer brands. Travel companies, all explorer brands. They're all about getting out and experiencing something new, testing something new. Okay. So that's how the archetype model works. And so when we work with brands, we actually start at this point to get a picture for the organisation. And then we go back and present it and make sure that there's consensus around that identity. And so far, there is. It's incredible how often people say, yeah, no, that is definitely us. We're doing one for a neighbourhood house at the moment where they came back as this one, the caregiver, which is all about looking after people. So my example of a caregiver brand is someone like Fred Hollow's Foundation. You know, they are there just to make sure people are looked after, really, by fixing their eyes and what have you. So they came back at this, and then this was their secondary archetype, the everyman, but it didn't kind of gel with them. And so they said, oh, what about this one? What about the magician? Can we have that maybe? Or can we have the ruler? And so I said, look, I'll give you the definitions of them, and if they fit and work for you, then we'll see how we go. And once they read through them all, they came back and went, no, this is definitely us. This is where we see ourselves in the world. And so they had 15 people do the assessment, and then we just consolidated those 15 results. So we try and do it as broadly as possible, so you do get a broad sense of input from the whole organisation. But this then does a number of things. This allows us to work out, if we're doing complete rebrand, it allows us to figure out what the logo and style should look like. Because if you want to be a really strong, powerful brand, like something down here leaving a mark on the world, pastel colours are not your colour, okay? You need strong colours, you need bold shapes. They need to reflect that that's where you see yourselves. Because good organisations, good businesses that actually do good marketing will then take that identity and give it to whoever writes their comms, whoever manages their social media, and will enforce this is the style of our organisation now. So we don't want to be talking about those things in that way. And I think World Vision have actually come out and said in the last 12 months, everything we talk about from this frame. So we are leaders in what we do, we set the scene for what we do, we're all about making sure that there is a way that things are done. And so that's what they've done. So all of their marketing and comms teams now have a style that all things are written to. And that's how you can then use it, is to take it back through the organisation to reinforce all of that, so that there's that consistent messaging that sits behind a strong looking brand. So that's how we look at brands, and then everything else is kind of how to think about your brand. Any questions? That's kind of my final slide. I can email this through to you if you like. I think I've got everyone's email address. I'll email it to you all as a PDF if you like. Yeah, happy to do that.
Thank you.